invited also members from the Jubilee side of government, and I don't know whether it's because of the El Nino. It looks like they're running late. However, we'll still start off with the show, and if they can join us as we go along, that'll be fine. If not, then we shall discuss the issues and see whether we can talk about where we are as a country and some of the solutions. Now, to the guests that are with me this morning, to my extreme left, I have Honorable Peter Kaluma, who is the Member of Parliament for Homa Bay Town.
Yeah, thank you.
Great to have you and welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and next to me we have Honorable Moses Kajwang, who is a senator for Homa Bay County. Again, karibu sana. Incidentally, you're both from Homa Bay, and it had actually not even been planned that way, but good to have you, gentlemen. And maybe let me start with you, Honorable Peter Kaluma, and this is in regards to what we saw yesterday. We saw members of the opposition walking out of Parliament in protest. What was that all about?
Yeah, it is something that has been happening about our legislation or legislative processes with Parliament. You know, we made a new constitution in 2010, and really, if you remember, we removed the executive from Parliament. We took the president out of Parliament, we took ministers out of Parliament, and we said Parliament will be members of Parliament. Right. Indeed, once we are there, we should be operating as a unit, not either CORD or Jubilee, not opposition, not government. I've said here before that we don't have an opposition, we don't have government. We have members of Parliament acting, you know, as one unit for the good governance of the country as legislators, right. and of course, you know, leaders doing other things. Now, what has happened also in the Constitution is that the executive then has its functions, Parliament has its functions. In terms of the power to legislate, if anybody bothered to look at Article 94, it says the legislative authority of the country is derived from the people and is vested in Parliament and exercised by Parliament, not Parliament and either the executive or the judiciary. It is exercised by Parliament. Now, we pass bills as Parliament, and of course, for them to become law, they proceed to what we call presidential assent. The president has to sign them, so that they take the force of law, and they become law. Yes, the president has powers under, remember it is Article 115 of the Constitution, to refer back a bill to Parliament, and with concerns or what we call reservations under those constitutional provisions, saying really Parliament reconsider or review
the following.
You know, have the following concerns. And by the way, the language of the Constitution is reservations. Reservations to mean you've passed a provision saying this and this. My concern is that it does not further public interest or it does not do good in this and that manner. Now, what we've had in the past, and this has cut across, you know, a bulk of several laws, you know, going to around 21 by my counting yesterday, is that Parliament using the power not to assent and refer a bill back to Parliament with reservations for reconsideration has been coming up with provisions which at times go against the real content of the basic law already passed. If you remember, most of these laws initially originate by policy, you know, initiatives from the executive, and some are even legislated. Now, what we've had before is that, of course, these provisions come, and if you are to overturn that presidential reservation, or you know, a provision that is proposing to be put in a law, replacing another or just totally new, then you need 2/3 of the members of Parliament sitting to agree. And Parliament has not been facilitative of those administrative processes. Remember when we had division of revenue bill, we had situations where, you know, members of Parliament who are on travel were all clamped down, they have to be in the country. And due notice goes to members of Parliament that really we have a business before Parliament that requires at the minimum 2/3 of us to transact. Now, what has been happening is that is lacking. You get, you know, something called the presidential referral or memorandum on another paper. And of course, they have been coming in the manner they come, and they become law simply because by omission Parliament cannot marshal the numbers due to other engagements. What we were saying therefore yesterday is that we had, you know, a very critical bill, the excise, you know, duty bill, where the president, after the bill was passed by Parliament and sent to him by assent, is saying that really we want you to do the following: fruit juices, vegetable juices, whether with sugar or not, will attract an additional 10 shillings per litre. I mean, this is a government which is fighting alcoholic drinks and you know, second generation, you know, alcohols around. You want to encourage people to take soft drinks as an alternative, but you are increasing prices of very basic drinks. you can imagine the array of drinks that will be affected by such provisions. We had a situation where if it is a border, and you remember this is an initiative which started during President Kibaki, the idea that we can import, motorcycles into the country. In fact, under Kibaki it was duty-free, purely duty-free. And that is how we phased out bicycles for, motorcycles. And you've seen the impact in the economy in terms of youth employment, the idea that people can, have a survival. We are proposing that, border or motorcycles, the pricing will be increased by 10,000 on account of excise duty following that presidential referral. And then, of course, we have motor vehicles. Over 3 years old, you pay an additional 200,000 shillings and over. Below 3 years, an additional 150,000 to the government. What we were protesting about is, number one, when we sat in Parliament yesterday, in fact, I can tell the nation that we had the numbers. And if you are watching the proceedings, there is a time I was shouting, saying, Speaker, the majority leader is whipping members of the Jubilee coalition out of Parliament, so that Parliament is disabled in so overturning the presidential assent. And we had a situation where the Finance Committee, which is the committee dealing with those matters that we had under the bill, had made a report saying, really, we reject everything and we propose a deletion. Okay. And then the committee is talking in unanimity. But the majority leader, using their machinations and maneuvers in Parliament, they remove a substantial number of members of Jubilee, that we are said we don't have numbers. But people are in the restaurant taking tea. And we were therefore telling the Speaker, you either, John, when you say we need 2/3, it is either Parliament ensures we have those 2/3 from the beginning to the end, or we don't transact that business. But we had a situation where even those committees' proposals are ignored. The President is now making laws that essentially the president has moved from the executive to be an effective legislator. That was the complaint we had. Which is moving in a manner that is contrary to the constitution, contrary to public interest, and contrary to what he himself told the nation on Mashujaa Day. You remember he was lamenting about the quality of laws. Right. We pass. I mean, he's seated back there, he's adulterating the laws, the good laws we've already made, and he's bringing back laws which hurt the public, but exploiting the gap we have in terms of the needs, the requirement of numbers of Parliament, by the whipping his members to make them become law. That is the complaint we had yesterday. All right,
Senator Kajwang, I don't know what your take is on what happened in that particular instance, and was that the best solution, given the challenge, of course, of having the 2/3, and secondly, is it illegal for him to send back his reservations with recommendations?
Yeah, Mike, we are staring into a serious problem in this country. A matter that is unconstitutional, that tends towards dictatorial. The thing here is that the president can let Senate and the National Assembly do anything and everything they want. But when the bills go to him for assent, he will return them, not with reservations, but with recommendations. We need an interpretation on this matter, because the Constitution is very clear that the president is supposed to express his reservations. What you have seen,
so the recommendation bit is not
yes, what you have seen in the past is the president returns the bills back to Parliament with recommendations, worded and crafted in such a way that he is now participating in the legislative process, which is a preserve of Parliament. And this is not an issue that only affects the National Assembly, because Senate is also part of Parliament. For your information, the President has only assented to 1 out of 4 bills that have been approved by Senate. In fact, even members of Senate who come from the Jubilee coalition, there have been some of the people who have been crying the loudest. Why must we then set up a Senate when the laws that we come up with are not assented to by the President? In the case of the Senate, it is very few of the laws that have been brought to us, with those reservations or with recommendations. But when it comes to the National Assembly, we can count close to 10 bills, where the President has brought back and made recommendations that make him appear as if he also wants to get a seat in the National Assembly and participate in that legislative exercise. That means that there's no need to have a National Assembly or to have the Senate. The President can sit with his legal advisors and his political advisors and draw all the laws in this country. If you came up with a very progressive bill today, You can do all that you want. Look at the bill that was dismissed as populist, this one on the Higher Education Laws Board. The president let the National Assembly go through all the motions, up to the point where it was approved, and with quite an overwhelming majority. And then the president sits down and says, we don't have money, this is populism, this cannot pass, and rejects it or sends it back with very significant recommendations. The president must allow Parliament to exercise its mandate as enshrined in the Constitution.
Okay.
CORD has taken a position, and walking out yesterday, I think, was also, it was a legitimate exercise or expression of frustration in the dark machinations coming from the government side. We as CORD, we have already instructed our lawyers, and it is a matter that we have discussed as a parliamentary group, that there are more than 10 pieces of legislation where the president has purported to act as a legislator. We are going to court, we are going to seek an interpretation from the Supreme Court on
All
this.
right. And just in case you're joining us now, just to mention, we did have members from the Jubilee side of government to be part of this panel, but unfortunately they've not arrived. It could be because of the rain and the traffic, and it might look, or one might wonder, why is it that it looks like we have people from one side of the political divide? It is not intentional, and we had indeed invited them. However, would like to still talk about the issues and look at solutions, and I'll come to you, Honorable Kaluma. And the question is, given that this is a loophole that, or shall we call it lacuna in the Constitution, which can be used, what's the solution? What's the way forward? Because is it illegal?
The Constitution is very clear. In fact, I wanted to say there is no gap. What we are saying is that we have unconstitutional maneuvers by the executive to legislate. In fact, if the president just kept to the wording of the Constitution, then we would not be in this situation. Because the Constitution says, upon receiving the bill, the president has two options: either send it back to Parliament
with
the reservations. Reservations are not recommendations. And by the way, my brother is speaking about recommendations, but the president is not merely recommending that have such and such provision or remove this, but he goes to the extent of drafting a legal provision to be put in the bill, either that was not initially present, or in deletion or substitution of one that was present. So that what we have is, the process of making law goes through three stages. First reading, where the general public and members of Parliament are alerted that there is a law passing. You need to begin, exercising your minds around it. You need to be, thinking about it. Second reading, when members of Parliament, having been alerted at the first reading stage, now come to debate it as representatives of the people, putting about all the thoughts they have gathered independently from others. And third reading or committee stage, where now the bill is gone through clause by clause. If you have suggestions for amendments and others, you go through. Now, when the president comes with a provision, like he says, insert clause 1 or clause 2 into the bill, which was not initially there. Essentially, this bill, if we proceed in the illegal manner in which the president has been proceeding, and that provision becomes law without passing through that legislative process. So that what I'm saying is that there is no lacuna or gap in law, but we have mischief being used based on interpretations by the Speaker and, of course, the executive to make unconstitutional law without public participation. Remember the processes I've told you through. There is a level, and you've been seeing in the newspapers, where we notify the general public that as members of Parliament, seated as Parliament or under this committee dealing with this matter, are inviting public participation or thoughts from the public on such and such issues. And of course, those thoughts can either come by written memorandum, or some writing, whether by letter, you write and put your thoughts, you tell us, remove this, we do this, or by word of mouth in those committee proceedings, whether we hold them in Kisumu or what part of the country. So essentially, we have a situation where the executive is seeking to circumvent that legislative process and is bringing, laws with, a force of law, provisions with the force of law, without passing through the legislative process proper. Okay. Because put it in the context of what we were doing yesterday, when a whole committee of Parliament, and Parliament is either the plenary or its committees, a committee as in unanimity, cutting across CORD and Jubilee, said this is not in public interest, this is not good for our country, this one we reject. But because of the numbers you twitch around, and you disable Parliament by lowering in Parliament, that provision becomes law. Then what becomes of the clear constitutional provision under Article 94 saying the legislative authority rests with Parliament, not to be shared by any other institution? What do you say of Article 1 and others that say the sovereign will of the people is with the people and may be exercised by them or through their elected representatives? How does it become useful for us to say that the president is not in the legislature with the executive? How do we sanction the independence, the status of these bodies to be able to check one another against the constitutionality of what they do instead of, having one another sit in them? So these are the legal issues. There is no gap. All we need is a proper court interpretation on how far the president can go in sending, how far in terms of
and what that reservations, what is entailed,
what are the content, what should the form be. And then you are told after the reservations are sent, Parliament then should reconsider the bill. Should Parliament be reconsidering what the president has just sent, or the bill itself? Reconsideration, it means the thing you are treating is something you had looked at before, you had considered before.
So technically what you're saying, when it comes from the president, it is actually coming with different wording and as a different bill from what went to him initially.
In fact, we have a situation where you can have a law saying Kenya is a multi-party democracy, and the president, using the benefit of referral, goes and says Kenya is a dictatorship. And by the way, what then the president needs to do is to call his members in Parliament to be out. It becomes law. That is how, awkward the situation we are talking about is.
Senator Kajwang, you've mentioned one of the solutions, and one of the things that court is looking to do is to address it legally and go to court and see how that will be done. What would you expect to be achieved by the court process after that has gone through?
We would like the court to pronounce itself on the definition of the word that is in the Constitution, which is reservation. My brother Kaluma has stated it very clearly, that the president goes beyond recommendation and gives the legal wording. In fact, he says this is how the bill should read in that particular section where I am unhappy with. We want the court to pronounce itself on that. Secondly, we would like the court also to pronounce itself on the process, as Kaluma has explained. Because when it comes from the president, the threshold now should not just be the 2/3. The president could have altered the intent of a bill so significantly that it might need to start from the beginning. And in some cases, you might find that such bills might then need to get the concurrence of both houses of parliament, not just looking for a 2/3, which we know the manner in which the National Assembly or the Senate is currently constituted becomes a problem. So those are two things, the definition of reservation, proper definition, and the process. Number three, also, it will be the legality of some of the other bills that have passed through similar approach.
Some that have already gone through.
There is the bill that touched on the benefits of the Prime Minister and the former Vice President. Is it legal? Is it proper? Is it a law that then can be upheld as a significant law in the land? Or should it have been subjected to further rigors? Because the president went ahead, whereas the National Assembly had said, let us pay these people because of their contribution to the nation. He brought in additional conditions, which then altered the spirit and intent that the members of the National Assembly had when they're debating this matter. So those are three significant areas that we want to get interpretation from the court. However, this is a legal issue, but also a political problem. The president of this country really does not need to be pushed by the courts to see things, because he's got an attorney general who is supposed to be his principal legal advisor. And we wonder what kind of advice he's getting from the attorney general. He has surrounded himself with certain people who either failed in a political contest or who are distinguished in law, and he has surrounded himself with people he's calling legal advisors. I wonder what kind of legal advice the president is getting. Accepted, he is not a lawyer, he did not go to law school, but he has to rely on good and proper legal advice. Politically, the president must allow the legislature to play its role. I can tell you, Mike, that there is this feeling that President Kenyatta, if he had the same constitution that his father had, or the same constitution that Moi had, probably Uhuru would have been a dictator. Because we've got one of the most liberal constitutions in this country. We've got one of the most open, theoretically open democracies and open societies and open politics compared to any other nation in Africa. But we still find the president getting away by twisting the law or ignoring the law or just outright impunity.
All right.
And on the political front, the court cannot force the president to do the right thing. The court can define what the right thing is, but there is also the political aspect where the president must have the goodwill, must have the good of this nation at heart, so that he does not just interpret the constitution in a manner that satisfies.
In all fairness, he's not here to defend himself, neither is the Jubilee members here. So I'd like us to just try and stick to the issues and solutions. And let's, Honorable Kaluma, let's look at the state of the economy, because I know that the opposition has been very vocal, especially when it comes to the Eurobond. And there's all sorts of information coming from both sides there. There's the opposition leader recently made some very sensational accusations that there are some people in government who are using the Eurobond to trade and have made up to 34 billion. In the newspaper today, apparently, according to the World Bank, we are not doing that badly in terms of economy. What's your take?
You need to talk to the person on the street, that person walking in the rain to find something to do by the end of the day, to return with something for their children or for themselves in industrial area and other places, to know that really our executive is engaging in too much PR, which is not supported by reality on the ground. The fact of the matter is that our economy is grounded. And by the way, this is something that cuts across not only the executive, but even Parliament. You saw the other day we were complaining about the very basics of basics. Facilities are lacking in Parliament. See a person saying we don't have even tissue paper. As we speak, we have El Nino. We have even projects we were to do under the Constituency Development Fund program. Some of them you get laboratories, classrooms in schools which were approaching the lintel. The El Nino has started. The rains are here with us. I've lost about 4 laboratories in which I'd spent over 4 million in Norma Bay Town constituency. I've missed, I've lost classrooms. The splash of water and rain which we just began last week.
But this El Nino is something which had been predicted and you knew it was coming. What did you do to save those classes before?
Certainly, money needs to come. Now, what I'm telling you is that for the past 8 months, not even that CDF, contrary to the public perception and the PR from government, is being released to members of Parliament. So we have a situation where we are saying, there is bursary for students going to colleges and universities. But this money is not there. We have programmed to construct this and this. It is at this stage. They are all stalled there. Nothing is moving. Nothing is moving in our country. And you remember when I was here, I said the biggest problem with our economy is not that we don't collect enough. We collect so much. The other day we were told we are a middle income economy. I mean, where is the money going? Last financial year, in terms of development expenditure, the government says only 52% was absorbed. It means 48% of the development expenditure was not absorbed. Where did that money go between 20th and 30th of June? For us to turn in July and lack even a coin to begin moving the country forward with. I mean, we have people employed, even for members of Parliament. You can have people taking 6 months, 3 months without pay, yet you are working within Parliament and all these things have been done. You remember was here, and I said we are losing so much in non-prioritized, expenditures. My brother was telling you about the Higher Education Loans Board, amendments that was saying we want to provide our children with sufficient loan money to be repaid in future to pay. I mean, what is wrong in our saying all students who pass, not those ones going to parallel program and others, should go to school? And why do you want to allocate only 6 billion towards this loan when you have a non-prioritized program like NYS, getting 25 billion? What are our priorities as a nation? I said here the other day, and you remember, I was saying, what I sniff is really that there is too much corruption on these NYS projects in Kibra and others. Look at what the newspapers are telling us today. One day, the government is saying no money was lost. We nipped the attempted fraud in the bud. The following day, the government is saying, oh, actually, we lost 791 million. The calls by the people that people step aside so that serious investigations can be done is ignored by the same government. But what happens? Today you are told all paper trail, all documents relating to that, particular fraud and corrupt practice have gone under, that they cannot be traced. I mean, what are we dealing with? We collect so much. And by the way, it is sad when we are told there is no money to sustain our economic growth and the economy generally, because you know the amount of taxes we pay. They're the highest, in my view, in the East African region, to 30% on income taxes. Look at the excise, look at all the other duties, the VAT and others. It's quite a lot of money the people of Kenya are paying. But we are sending them only to areas from where we can, loot them, and we engage in too much wastage and corruption. And that is where we are grounded. The truth, fellow Kenyans, is that on economy, if we were a Western country, the president would have resigned by now, or there would have been,
upheaval.
An upheaval by the people by now. That's why I'm saying, really, there are some things we don't need to look casually at. And the Prime Minister came from abroad. He says, let us talk together about our economy. When a teacher hangs himself in Nyandarua because his pay for September has been denied, it affects every teacher across the country and all of us. Okay. We are exploiting these situations because we say, even if I was so bad, my people in my village, the people of my tribe, if they have the numbers, will sustain my governments. I'm saying a time has reached where, as all Kenyans, we must think about how best to govern ourselves and how best to move together on matters that, is of interest to all of us without considering where we come from and who is in leadership.
All right, Senator Kajwang, in terms of solutions, the dollar strengthening is not a unique problem to Kenya. As a matter of fact, there's some countries who have seen it go fourfold. And that's something which hopefully with time it should stabilize. What do we need to do as a country to get out of the quagmire that we're in right now?
It's an abdication of responsibility when the government keeps telling us that there are global forces and these are forces beyond our control. Every central bank, every government can undertake certain measures to control the volatility of the exchange rate vis-a-vis other economies. We are being told that Kenya's economy, Kenya's currency has depreciated by just about 20-something% compared to 80-something% coming out of South Africa. We are not South Africa. We are Kenya, and we've elected a government and given it that social contract, signed that social contract with the government to take charge of the economy. Mike, this thing of ease of doing business that is now being splashed in our faces all over means nothing. It is an academic exercise. You cannot talk of ease of doing business and then ignore the corruption perception index. So in ease of doing business, we are being told we have improved. But in the corruption perception index, we are told we are sinking further. And the government never talked about that because we are doing badly, worse off when it comes to corruption. If you look at the parameters in the ease of doing business index, one of them is access to capital. That yes, it is becoming much easier to access capital in Kenya. When Equity Bank was releasing their financial statement updates, the CEO of Equity Bank made it very clear that a number of Kenyan businesses are putting on hold their big projects because the interest rate is not feasible for someone undertaking a huge project. If you're going for a commercial bank loan, it's coming close to 30%. Now, you can imagine the agony that that teacher has. The teacher who took a small loan to take his child to school, he has got no salary, and the interest rate has skyrocketed, and he has to pay. And he cannot say, can't pay, won't pay. Because if he says can't pay, won't pay, the bank will come and auction his property. There's a lot of pain Kenyans are going through. So when you tell me that access to capital has improved, what quality is that capital? When you tell me that it's much easier to register business, it should take 1 day to register business, the way it is happening in Rwanda. In Kenya, it still takes a number of days, even with the Huduma centers.
Solutions. What needs to be done?
Mike, we are not, and let me say this, I'm not a consultant for the Jubilee administration for me to tell them that this and that is what must be done. We need seriousness. we have told the head of state that he needs to wake up, because it looks as if the economy is on autopilot. We must now start seeing the central bank, we must now start seeing the Ministry of Finance taking a much more hands-on approach towards issues. Yes, today I've seen in the dailies some supplement that has been put up by the cabinet secretary in charge of finance talking about the Eurobond proceeds. I think this Eurobond thing, we also got it very wrong. If I gave the analogy of a farmer who agrees with the wife that Mzee, go and get a loan so that we can come and improve our farm, then Mzee gets the money, spends a little bit on the way, comes back home and builds a house instead of increasing the number of pigs or cattle in the homestead. We must get to a situation where we are growing significant sectors of the economy. The issue here is that we are paying a lot of money in terms of debts. We have taken debt to finance infrastructure. Infrastructure is like sometimes building a wall around your house or building a new building. It might not generate revenues in the immediate run. We must now, in terms of solution, if you allow me to be a consultant for Jubilee, we must look at the critical sectors of the economy that have got the biggest impact as far as revenue collection is concerned. We must look at tourism. Tourism is dead, and the entire coastal economy is on its knees as a result. Agriculture is on autopilot. We are relying on the mercies of God. Our agriculture is so rain-fed, is so dependent on God. We must take urgent and deliberate measures. A place like Israel, which is in a virtual desert, they have taken deliberate efforts to ensure that they have food security and they've got enough food. We keep importing foodstuff. And that is why we suffer whenever there is some volatility in the foreign currencies. So the government and the president must prioritize growth of the economy. We must increase the number of cattle in our farm, rather than building a farmhouse and building a wall around our farm, things that are not going to generate revenue. We must also be sensitive to the plight of our workers and motivate our workers. We are talking about our inability to raise revenues. You know, one interesting thing is that by not paying teachers their salary in September, the government has also lost out on 2.5 billion in terms of pay as you earn. You know, it's like sometimes we are penny wise and pound foolish. On one hand, we are saying we don't have money. On the other hand, we are saying,
losing loads of money.
You know, we are losing lots of money. Again, in terms of solutions, we must deal with corruption, because corruption costs this country a lot of money. You heard when Obama came, he talked about the number of jobs lost. That was just in terms of jobs. But how much money is lost in corruption? We have talked of 791 million out of NYS. The other day we are being told 900 million or so could not be accounted for. So in terms of solution, Mike, fix corruption, get rid of all these people implicated in corruption. It is a surprise. In fact, it beats the logic. And for those of us who walk around the country and talk to ordinary people, it still beats everyone's understanding why Anne Waiguru is still in office when all these things are coming up every other day, and other people who were merely suspected of engaging in corruption or entertaining the thought of being corrupt are out of office for the last 6 months. Those are some of the things that the president must fix. Otherwise, these reports that come from the World Bank or from the IFC that it is easier to do business in Kenya really means nothing. We must also deal with security. Finally, Mike, in terms of solutions, one thing that we have not talked about is this war in Somalia. How much are we spending in Somalia every day? How much are we spending in Somalia annually? A country that has accepted that it is broke, is still engaged in a war whose end we don't know, whose objectives are unclear, whose achievements are also mysterious. We must also bring back this matter to the table and ask ourselves, this war in Somalia, is it just bleeding us to death slowly? Or what are the benefits? I don't think that the charcoal that is being smuggled through the country or the sugar that is being smuggled through the country is enough to mitigate the cost of this war. We must stop a needless and endless war. And by the way, if you look at the history of Tanzania, you'll realize that towards the collapse of Ujamaa, one of the factors that led to the collapse of the Tanzanian economy as it was then was the war that Tanzania had engaged in with Uganda. because it bled the country of resources that was required to develop the country and to pay civil servants, and that went into a war that was endless and unnecessary. So we must also deal with this issue of the war in Somalia.
All right, let me come to you, Honorable Peter Kaluma, and looking at even some of the proposed laws by your colleague Canaan, and this is not the first time. We may throw mud at the government and say they're selfish and all this, but when we also look at the members of parliament and some of the laws that they are likely to pass through, we're also left questioning and wondering, should you have that position, what would you do? But now, let's hear your comments on Canaan's proposed law of even having members of parliament, wives having diplomatic passports. What would drive an agenda like that?
Yeah, I've not read at the law. At the bill proposed. So I must tell the nation that I'm talking from, you know, the basis of what
you've read in the media.
I've read in the media or I've heard in the media. But let me say that it is not in all cases where members of parliament just sit to think about themselves. In fact, I've said here before that there is so much members of parliament do for, in fact, invariably, all that we do are in the interest of the nation. Senator Kajwang was talking a short while ago about is to do business. Do you know, just recently we passed the new companies law. We passed the laws relating to, you know, registration of businesses and how expeditious, you know, those processes can be. We passed consequential amendments to laws related to how to establish and run businesses. Of course, about 21, you know, laws all touched and brought together. So you see a situation in which, you know, Parliament is doing so much that is not just geared towards self-interest. I wanted to request the people of Kenya, and more particularly the media, let us avoid a situation where we portray leaders as negative throughout. President Obama came to this country in 2006, and he was a senator, like Honorable Moses Kajwang. He was a member of parliament. That is what a senator is. You saw the state resources that accompanied him here in 2006, not the last time he was around here. A state, you know, hired, you know, plane with an entourage of media and all other people. So look at the investment around the leadership of world, I mean countries which have grown. Obama was here as president the other day.
But as the media, we cannot portray something that is not there. We're merely reporting what is there.
You know, you've made people to believe, for instance, that a member of parliament earns so much. There is nothing to earn in parliament. In fact, let me tell Kenyans, if you want to make money, don't go to parliament.
Kaluma, those are just facts and figures. We have not exaggerated anything that is not there.
And by the way, the current parliament earns half what the 10th and 9th parliament was earning. You know, you've not exposed this. The previous parliament was earning 1.2 million take home without tax. We are earning some 680,000 after. In fact, I think below 580 after tax. And by the way, you take mortgage, everything is gone. What I wanted to say is that, does it hurt really to say that a member of parliament will have a diplomatic passport? I mean, members of parliament sit and approve appointments by the state, like cabinet secretaries and others, and immediately they are appointed. They have a state commendation next to their name. Have you seen members of parliament taking that? I mean, as a leader, I've been called to Russia. I'm going to United Kingdom. Why should I be huddled somewhere, you know, for eternity? What image does it portray of our country when a person is seeing a member of parliament huddled somewhere there?
The issue is not the member of parliament, but how far do we extend this?
If I travel with my wife, what is wrong in my traveling with her? Wherever I'm being, you know, exited through to be able to engage, you know, as a leader in those functions which have taken me to that country. Why do we think that every time a member of parliament is traveling, it is on leisure?
Okay,
I think he's going with a wife, it is leisure. What I wanted to say,
we're straining on the nut. The issue here is, or the question is based on the fact that are members of parliament not becoming too selfish on the interest of the country?
What does a diplomatic passport take from a country?
That is just one.
I mean, a diplomatic pass is to enable you exit smoothly through the international airports. There is nothing more about it.
Through exits.
Yeah, so if it is diplomatic airport, I wanted to request the media and the people of Kenya not to read much. I mean, let your leaders pass to go and do execute the business that has taken them abroad. If there is something untoward members of parliament are doing, let us deal with it. And let us remember, my brother, that it is only within Parliament as an institution where you have media, you know, itself housed there, interacting with members of Parliament throughout. Try having the media like your media. Even in a cabinet, you know, secretary's office, it can't work. We are more open, and I wanted to tell the people of Kenya that it is high time the society moved as fast as the current members of Parliament are moving. I believe we are way ahead of the society in terms of where we should go. It is not all negatives as people think.
Honorable Kajwang, maybe as your closing comments in terms of solutions and what we need to look up to as a country.
Allow me to comment on that proposal as reported in the media about members of Parliament seeking certain perks and privileges for themselves and for their relatives. I got into politics, just elective politics, less than 1 year ago. And prior to that, I was in the private corporate sector. And I interacted with CEOs and chairs of boards of companies that controlled funds bigger than 3, 4, 5 counties that we have today. And one, which I will not give a name, I was impressed by the humility and simplicity of the gentlemen who ran that company that had a series of investments cutting across insurance, banking, logistics, etc. They drove themselves to work every day. They didn't walk around with armed guards, and they exited and entered the country using a passport just like ours. And when I went into politics, all of a sudden, I went back to visit them with an armed guard and a chauffeur and with all this Mheshimiwa air around me. We need a paradigm shift in our perception of leadership in this country. I have visited a few countries. One of them where I went to was Cuba the other day, where political leadership is almost a part-time venture. If you're a news anchor, then that becomes your job. That's where you earn your bread from. Political leadership becomes service to the people, and you do not expect to be compensated or remunerated from there. Where I differ with my brother Kaluma is that the 500,000 could appear to be little money because everyone is expecting something from members of Parliament and members of the National Assembly. We do not have a kitty where we draw money for Harambes. It is from that salary. But it still sounds a bit offensive when we complain about our 500,000 and the teacher is earning 13, 14, 15,000. We must change our leadership. There needs to be a balance. Could we have people who are full-time professionals and part-time politicians? The problem of full-time politicians or full-time politics is what has brought this country the kind of problems that we have today. So I personally don't think that we should be pampered or we should be given privileges simply because we were elected, but we need to, it might take a generation or two. Right now, when I drive out of this compound, the gentleman at the gate will expect something from me, but they will not expect something from you simply because I'm a Mheshimiwa. So it is that thinking around leadership that needs to be changed.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll have to wind it up right there. Honorable Moses Kajwang, Senator for Homa Bay, and Honorable Peter Kaluma, Member of Parliament, Homa Bay Town. Thank you, gentlemen. And that is the State of the Nation. This is where we wind up Morning Express this morning, but do stay with us. We've got News Hour coming up in just a bit.